Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by another worthy warrior, Keri Eichberger. Keri lives just outside of Louisville, Kentucky with her husband, Mike, and their 5 kids. Her own roller coaster of life trials, redeemed by a relationship with the Lord, fueled her desire to help others discover and experience the fullness of life found in Jesus. After years of writing for an online audience, she became ordained through Southeast Christian Church, giving life to her full-time ministry. Keri is the author of Win Over Worry and continues to follow her calling to bring faith-filled encouragement to others around the world through her social media influence, devotionals, and faith-fueled podcast. Keri and I actually met in September at a women's ministry retreat, and it was such a joy to get to know her a bit. She is so wise and so thoughtful, and I'm excited to hear even more about her story today. Keri, thank you so much for joining us on the Created Worthy podcast. I can't wait to hear even more about your real life story.
Danielle, okay, I have been looking forward to this conversation since I met you at our retreat. You're just vulnerable heart and spirit, and our honest, raw conversations. I just knew we had to have this conversation deeper and share with others. So I'm excited to see where we take this today.
It's gonna be so fun. Don't worry. I promise. I make it
Yeah,
I make it fun and comfy. And just remember, like,
it's
I
gonna be
am
great.
self-proclaimed weird in a good way. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be
I hide that too.
Did you say you hide that?
I kinda hide that, but it's like I'm
I
saying
don't
I
hide
have
it.
that too, but I kinda hide that. I mean,
That's
it's
good.
there, it's
It's
for sure.
there.
You hang
I
with me
like to
long
pull
enough,
it
you'll
out.
see it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
All
that's
right, pull it
always my
out,
goal is
girl.
like pull we're gonna pull out the
All
weird.
right,
That's the
here it
fun
comes.
part.
Okay.
So I know that you've been on lots of different podcasts before, but what makes Created Worthy a little bit different is that we focus in on the who you are and how you became who you are before we get into all the amazing things that you are currently doing. So with that, I would love for you to take us back to where you started off in life. Where are you from? And can you maybe paint a picture for us of what life was like growing up for you?
Okay, I'm gonna try to paint a picture without giving you so much detail that I'm sitting here 2 hours later
That's
telling you,
okay. I've got
about me
time.
as a little girl. But, oh goodness, so I live in Louisville, Kentucky, right outside of Louisville, Kentucky, like you mentioned. I've lived here my entire life. My husband and I both have, and we probably won't leave unless I can convince him to move south to the beach, which I would really love to do, but anyway, I digress. So,
One
grew
day.
up in Louisville and, grew up in a very safe Christian home. I say safe, but just life was stable, life was solid. Grew up going to church. All things were pretty somebody might say boring. To me, it was pleasant and I have good
Yeah.
memories. And the life was sort of like, simple, easy for me until I got into my teenage years, as a lot can probably relate to. And I discovered boys, and things really got interesting for me. And I say that because all of a sudden, this girl that loved Jesus and spent every Sunday all day at church choir, did all the things, just instead, had given her life to the Lord, basically took a turn and filled that heart with a boy. And I think a lot of people can
Mm.
relate to this. And I've
Oh, yes.
since done so much self discovery of what that did to my life. Um, but basically, and there's so many directions I could go with this, but essentially, I began to fill my life and worth and my purpose with a person that, as we all know, ultimately people do disappoint us and they do fail us. And when we fill our hearts and our souls with the wrong things and we lose those things, it can devastate. And that is the beginning of my story in a nutshell. So, what was a relationship that began in middle school, literally in the sixth grade, that went all the way through middle school, through high school, that then ended at the end of high school just because nothing happened to him. We just parted ways, more his
Yeah.
decision than mine. But this began a season of life that I'll just say became dark.
Mm,
And I didn't know where to turn. I had filled myself with the world instead of the Lord. And
mm,
um, I was seeking, grasping at everything I possibly could to fill my time, to fill my heart. And I was grasping at all the wrong things, which just like the relationship ultimately failed me. And it be turned into more relationships. And it was, um, it was alcohol, it was partying, it was not going to class and doing well. Like I had really done well in school all the way. And then I just sort of crashed and burned in college. And anyway, I could get into more depth there, but I'll just tell you that I hit a rock bottom
yeah.
after my college experience, and
Well,
I say,
let's
go,
pause
yeah,
there
okay, you want,
actually.
all right,
I would like to know what your rock bottom looks like. And the reason why is not because
mm-hmm,
I'm just nosy. It's
okay,
not because I want you to just bring up all the darkness. It's because I think when we share the parts, and again, if this is not a processed part of your story or fully processed part of your story, then I 100% respect that. But if this is something that you've walked through and you've processed through,
mm,
I think that it's really actually healthy and it helps
okay,
other people. When we are able to share the darker things that we've walked through, because it then we're able to display the light and the goodness that God has redeemed, right? Like his
yes, no,
redemption, the redemption story is so much greater when we actually know what he's redeemed you from.
oh, absolutely. And I will tell you that along these years that I'm kind of quickly scrolling through, there were so many detours along the way. I say detours, there were sort of like checkpoints where I stopped and assessed. And so other things happened, and a few little, ups and downs. But I'm glad that you stopped there, because I probably could have kept on going and finished, because I was only at the age of, 22, and I'm now 44. So I was trying to scroll through my life for you
I'm
for
sure
whatever
there are
reason. But
lots of
anyway,
trials.
I
There
know.
are
No,
always
but
mountains and valleys.
it's interesting because it really is. So in that time, what did happen is, so w- i- a lot of anxiety and depression surfaced that I did not know. That was a part of it too. So really, I would say that me seeking all these things is partially because I didn't know this before, but I am someone who is predisposed to anxiety and depression. And I wouldn't know that at the time, but it's definitely part of my family's story too. So I sort of inherited that a little bit. Um, anyway, so when I was a junior in college, and I was having a lot of I was dealing with some depression, having some anxiety. It was my junior year when 9/11 hit, and I take that back. It was my senior year. Sorry. I gotta get my years straight. My senior
That's
year of
okay.
college was 9/11, and that was when things took a drastic, that was kind of the beginning of the beginning of this long pit, let's say, the
Yeah.
breaking point for me. And that was because the anxiety took a turn to panic attacks. And so what once I was sort of like was at the surface, and I was just dealing with like putting band-aids on, I could no longer handle on my own and had to seek medical help. So all the quick fixes that I was trying to cover up my symptoms with were not working anymore.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm grateful for that, because I did need that help. And I always want to say, if you go through a season, you need medication and you need medical help, go for it. I did, and I needed it in that
Amen.
season for sure.
Yeah.
And I did that. And that was actually the beginning too of a realization of like what I was actually experiencing, and the severity of how bad things have gotten, because I was until that time just sort of sleepwalking through life, so to speak.
Mhm.
So that was sort of the beginning of it. And
What
it was
were
helpful.
what did panic attacks look like for you from a physical perspective? Because I know that I've also dealt with panic attacks at different seasons in
Mhm.
my life, but actually how panic attacks manifest in my body now looks a lot
Mm.
different from when I was a kid. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious, um, what how did you know that that what you were experiencing was a
Right.
panic attack?
Yeah.
Like how
Well,
was it different than just anxiety?
okay, well, now I'm gonna rewind about 5 years from there. I'd actually
That's
had my
okay.
first one when I was in high school, and, because like I said, there's a lot of little detours along the way that things happened that sort of then played out later in my life, but that was one. So when I was, my freshman year or sophomore year in high school, this is where I, get a little foggy with the years. My boyfriend at the time was jumped at a football game and severely beaten by 6 large men, and it like, I literally was
Yeah.
thought he was dead. I mean, it was one of those things where I ran and I realized and when you talk about fight or flight, I was like the flight girl. I was running down the corridor, the concessions hallway thinking like, "Just lost this guy." Anyway, that was a beginning of so I started a lot of fear and worry was planted. And I talk about this actually, and I wrote a book, and this is a big part of that. I write this story there, and this was the beginning of that experience for me. But I started avoiding a lot of life because I had this fear of something happening, and I didn't want to deal with it. So, but then later discovered I would then go to like my next big event, and I got kind of scared. I all I knew at the time was I was just kind of scared. I wanted to leave. It didn't feel right. I felt a little bit like off and edgy. I didn't know what panic attacks were or what anxiety attacks were. I just felt off. And then I remember getting in the car that night, and all of a sudden it was like everything just went like tunnel vision, and I felt like somebody was like out to get me. It was the strangest, almost out of body experience, and to the point that I went home that night, and my parents were like, well, "What is wrong with you?" Like they thought I was on drugs, and I'm like, I had never touched anything in my life at this point. I'm like, I promise I'm not in it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I really don't. And so when I went, they took me to the emergency room because I mean it was that bad
Mm, yeah.
experiencing such physical symptoms that like that would be almost
Yeah.
related to somebody apparently who was like on
On
drugs.
drugs. Yeah. I'm
Right.
sure you're like,
And
I also feel like I'm on drugs, but I
exactly. I'm
promise I
like,
didn't
if
take
this is what
any.
this is like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so then the doctor said, of course he said he checked my blood and he was convinced I was on something. They checked, they did all the blood work because I was a teenager and they're like, sure,
Yeah.
she's not on something. They did all the blood work, everything turned back normal, except he said my potassium was low or something. He gave me banana, sent me on my way. Basically said, I think she probably had an anxiety attack or something like that.
Yeah.
Kind of put that in my back pocket, moved on with life, but always knew that was possible, but then really avoided um, those types of environments. That life looked a little different for me from then on. I got very much risk averse, I would say. Well, what looked risky, and I avoided things that once created even the smallest bit of fear and worry. But so fast forward now to when I was in college and started having some similar symptoms. I sort of knew from that, even though it had been a while, when I experienced symptoms of just like again that edgy sort of feeling physically almost shaky.
Mm.
um what happened when I would say I finally had like a full-blown panic attack, I went into this sort of like out of body sort of experience for like 3 days straight. Like I went
3
into this and it
days.
went on for 3 days. I was actually with my best friend. We went to travel to go dress. She was my first friend to get married, and we all went. Two of our friends. We went to Cincinnati, Ohio, and we went dress shopping. And that whole weekend, I just was like, "This." I feel so like I wasn't right. I felt like I was outside of myself. It was the strangest thing, and that was right after 9/11. Um, and essentially and I think I came back and maybe I'm not sure what I don't remember all the details because I was sort of like, okay, well, I don't know what that was all about, move on. Although that is when I went to see the psychiatrist finally and started talking to someone, getting the right medication to get me in a better place, which did help me. But that was, and really, I haven't had many more. That was the worst it ever got. That
Yeah.
was the worst I ever got,
It
and
was
the
bad.
reason being yes, absolutely. The reason being because I will say, started doing the work I needed to really repair my heart.
Yeah.
And that was what real and then ultimately led me to truly filling my heart and soul with the right things. That was the beginning of that journey. There was a little brief encounter in there right after that. I met this other boy that I allowed to like refill my soul again. And so I'll say that was kind of a temporary band aid. And then after that ended, I was like, okay, here I am again in the same spot. This is a problem. I have got to do some work. And that's when I actually started seeing a Christian counselor and went to work with the Lord this time. And
Yeah.
everything
You
changed
bring
from
in.
there.
Yep.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. So was that right after college then that you
Yes.
started seeing a Christian counselor? So right after nine
Yeah.
eleven.
Yeah,
And
9/11 was, yeah, the fall, and then
was the 3 day panic attack right at that time as well?
it was, yeah, right
Was
after
it spurred
9/11.
on by 9/11?
I really think it was because that created a lot of fear, and I think a lot
Yeah,
of people experienced that were,
for sure.
aware of what was going on in the world at that time, and I would learn soon thereafter that I would have triggers at any point when I would watch the news too much and knew what was going on, and we haven't really experienced anything, I think, to that degree that created such fear. It just that was just hit so
COVID,
close to
but
home to many of
it
us, it hit so close to home. Um, but, now since then, there are definitely triggers when things are going on in the world that
yeah,
feel out of my control, that are scary. But like I said, since then I have different perspectives now, and my heart
yeah.
is in a different place to handle those things better for sure.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the Lord has become the thing that your identity
Yeah,
is based on
absolutely.
rather than the people or the
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
And that's a good work that he's done in you.
Mhm.
And that's exactly
Yeah.
what he wants us to do, right? Is like
Mhm.
we that's why it's so important to me to have a faith and to be growing in my faith and learning more about God and seeking him
Mhm.
and all of especially if you're predisposed to mental illness of any kind,
Mhm. Yeah.
whether that's anxiety, whether that's depression, whether that's borderline personality disorder, whatever it
Mhm.
is. um when there is something there that could be chemically off, um, or you were raised in a family where there was mental illness around you, whether it was a sibling or
Mhm.
a parent or something like that, like it is so easy for us to just go back to that place where it's like, well, this is how I operate. Like, I don't know how to change it. I've always been this way, or
Mhm.
they've always been that way, and it's affected me in this way. And so that's why I am the way I am, and I can't do anything to change it. But that's not the truth. That's
Mhm.
not the truth. The truth
You're right.
is that the Lord has brought us a new way that we can
Mhm.
only find through him. And
Yep.
he allows us to heal. He allows us to do the work. He leads us to
Mhm.
do the work. He leads us to the right people when we start opening ourselves up to new opportunities, and or we hit a place where it is our rock bottom when we're like, enough is enough.
Mhm.
Enough is enough. So when you hit your rock bottom and you said enough was enough, did you know that it was God that you were seeking?
No, not at the time. I really didn't. I think it was like d I didn't know in that moment it was God that I looking back, I know he was always after me. I mean, I really looking back, I believe he was reaching out to me all along, and there were opportunities, and there were people in my life, and I was just so reluctant to let go of the comforts and the things that I thought would fill me because things that at one point had filled me, I was so reluctant to let go, but I think at that rock bottom point, I realized I can't get that back. I can't get that back, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit, I think that it was like God was my last resort, sort of, but I knew he was there. I
It's so
just
real though.
oh yeah, it's real. It was
It's
like,
so real.
"Okay, all right," nothing I'm doing is working, and the world keeps failing me, and I used to speak and preach and sing about the Lord as our rock and our redeemer, and I am looking to everything else to redeem me and be my foundation. So, okay.
I
Let's
think
let's
that's such a human thing to do, though, because that's the thing about faith, right? Is it's a belief in something that we cannot see, we cannot feel.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it's a belief in a person who we've never physically hugged or we've
right.
never physically laid our hands on, but yet we are called to trust in him, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
as humans, what we tend to do is we look for the tangible things that can make sense to us. Like we want to rationalize things. That's what our brains like our fleshly desires do. And I think that's it's a really hard thing because in your teenage years all of a sudden you've got these hormones and you've got
Mhm.
lots more distractions, and instead of just
Yes.
staying in one classroom, you walk around the school and go to a bunch of different classrooms and see so many more people than you ever saw before. And it's teenage years are just a really wild time in a person's
Yeah.
life for every single
Yeah.
person. um
Yes.
and that's where we really, I think our brains are in this phase of development where we really want to make sense of things. Like it doesn't make sense why we can't go and find ourselves, right? Why do we have to go
Right.
learn about algebra when we could go be like exploring? Like
Yeah.
in your mind, it makes more sense to
Right.
do that rational, tangible thing. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's kind of where a lot of people get stuck. And I mean, we all face this. I think it's a constant thing because we are human that we want to rationalize the things around us. And what that actually ends up leading to is not being fulfilled. Unfulfillment. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Dis
It ca
in fulfillment? Whatever it is.
In a writer's world, you can use any of those words, in my
Oh,
opinion.
perfect. So being unfulfilled, there we go.
Yes, there.
It leads to being unfulfilled when you're seeking like
Mhm.
all you want. Our core
Mm.
desire is to
Yes.
belong. We want to
Yes.
belong. We want to feel loved. We want to feel like
Mhm.
we have purpose. And so we
Right.
go and we search for this in all these tangible ways, and then we
Right.
still can't find it. And I
Mhm.
think that God allows us to go through that on purpose
Yeah.
because he's like, hey, look, you've tried all the things. And do you feel good? Like, do
Yeah.
you feel
How
fulfilled?
does this feel? Right,
How does
right.
this feel?
Mhm.
Because I'm right here. And you know, for a
Mhm.
lot of people, it's like, you know, I'm here. I'll be here. He's not going anywhere just because you're doing your wandering journey or you're adventuring around.
Right, right,
But
right.
he's a patient and loving God in that
Mm.
he allows us to hit those rock bottoms. And it is those rock bottoms that where he is able to show up and be there and perform the miracles
Yes.
and just be the God that he's always been, but we didn't
Mm.
see until we hit that.
Right.
So that in itself
Mm.
serves such a grand purpose
Yes.
because we
And
have
it
to go through that process.
mhm. Absolutely. And doesn't it make it all then well, for me, it made it all worth it. And I'm kinda one of those people that have to feel like anything I do is, worth it. It's like I don't wanna waste my time. And sometimes I could have easily looked at all those years of my life like, what a waste, but I look at it totally different now.
Yeah.
I believe that God used that to show me the depth of his love and
Yes.
to hopefully more than anything now help somebody else because I think that we all at some point experience this.
Yes. In all different ways. It takes all different
Mhm. Yep.
shapes and forms. But
Mhm.
you're right. We all do experience this. And I think that's because we're human. Like
Mhm.
we are, we're human beings. Like I
Yep.
don't know any humans who aren't human. Do you? I don't know any
Exactly.
people.
No,
Zero
now we all
people.
have
I've
to
never met anyone who's not human. All right. So back to your
Yeah.
story. You get through college, you start seeing a Christian counselor.
Mhm.
What does your life look like after that? After you started seeing your Christian counselor and
Yeah.
started to realize that God was what you're missing.
Yeah, and it's funny when you say that back to me, and I'm thinking, all right, well, what's next? The truth is, and I just have to be totally honest, it's not perfect from there. And this was a difficult process, and even it's really
Yeah.
in the looking back that I can see it more clearly, but there was some immediate relief. There was slowly some light bulbs. I did feel the peace begin, and it was a progression. And the more time I spent with God and getting to know him and with his people, it slowly over time gave me more peace. It allowed me to infuse him into my decisions, and it's in those changing my habits, which changed my days, which changes your life. And so I did have more peace. I was learning about him. It was slow, but when I met with this counselor, we really unraveled a lot of my past, and it took some digging up and digging out of some dark stuff, and that was a long process because it was a year. It was years in the making, basically.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm thankful for that, and I think it's important that we do that work and we really do to dig down and determine where it started and, where we kind of went off course to help us to determine what we need to change. But it was about a year after that that I then met my husband, and that was also, and I'm so thankful for we always will make jokes like, "If I had only, found you sooner and I could have been there,"
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, "I don't think I was ready for you. I really don't think I
Yeah.
was in a good place," and I'm thankful to have met him at a healthier place in my life when, honestly, I didn't need someone as much as, I had before. And so I was able to really begin a much healthier relationship, though we still had our struggles,
Yeah.
for sure. And this continued. This was just the beginning of something for, and I was able to then begin a Christian marriage. And we started early on. We joined a couples group at church, and he started coming to church with me when we started dating. And that was something that he really hadn't been involved in before. So that was
Yeah.
really sweet and
Was
fun.
he
And
a Christian before you guys got married?
he was a Christian, but not a practicing Christian.
Okay.
So he had been to church, but really was not. He will tell you he did not have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that was also a process and journey for him that we're still growing through.
Yeah.
But that was there's so many things from there, but that was, that really I think that when I look at pivotal places in my life, that was the first real pivot that year after I started, seeing counseling, and I started going to church again religiously because I had not up until that point. I mean, I did when I was growing up and then in college. If somebody could grab my hand and pull me, whether it was if I was home for a break or, a couple times when someone did in college, but you know, that was that was really the
Yeah.
beginning of a new phase, so
Okay. So you have found yourself in a healthier relationship than you've ever had before.
Mhm.
You're in a growing Christian marriage with a man who I assume loves you very much. But
I
there
would
are
I would I would
still,
I would say so.
yes. And you guys are still married, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So obviously, there are always relationship struggles. I know for the first year in my marriage, it was really, really, really hard. Um,
Amen.
and yeah, like some people are like, oh, my first year was great. And then others are like, And we were one
Mm-mm.
of those like, people.
I'm an
And yeah, you are also a Yeah. And I think when you've come from a past with previous toxic relationships, um, it does add a layer of additional challenge because it's like I don't even know how to be treated right. I don't know how to treat someone else in an honorable way. Like everything just feels so new, and not to mention obviously now you're combining your whole life. You're living with somebody, living with someone
Mhm.
in itself has its own things. So how did you navigate through the newness of marriage in a relationship that was a totally different relationship than
Yeah,
anything you've
yeah,
ever had before?
yeah. I've gotta bring up a point that I had made earlier, and that was our chat about, this idea of somebody else being what fills you.
Yeah.
And as much as I am telling you that I learned that's not the case, I think there is this worldly desire in us to still try to make that happen. And
Mm.
so it showed back up in my life as soon as I would find someone that um, that gave me the love and affirmation and care, I wanted to put that person in that place to fill my life and all the empty voids and all the hurts and the pains. And in some ways, in marriage, we both are doing the same thing. We might not be aware, but I think we're both doing that. We kind of come into it selfishly.
I think
So
it's
as much
hard
as I
not to.
it is. It
It's
really
so
is. And
hard
so
not to.
yeah, and so as much as I want to act like, hey, I was recovered from all of this, and in some ways I did learn that God was the one, but it's an ongoing battle. I
Yeah.
think it shows up in our lives throughout our lives in different ways. And it's something that we always have to be aware of. And
Mhm.
I think I just had this conception because, again, before I was dating, I wasn't married. We were just dating. And I was sort of like, I don't blindly living my life, like letting this person fill my soul, just this romantic idea. And I was feeling more responsible about it. But what I had thought about marriage is that was that person, like that I think subconsciously I thought that is what their role was, is to fill me and to take care of me. And even though we say all those things when in our vows, truly it is no one's job. And I know this now.
Yeah.
um,
I'm like,
Still,
this is
God is number
convicting.
one. Yeah, still, God is the only one, and He is still to be number one to fill our hearts. And if I'm
Yeah.
being totally honest, when I first got married, it was kind of this like, rub and push and pull and tug of war of who's number one. And many times my husband, he won. He won my
Mhm.
heart over the Lord. And that is so dangerous in
Mhm.
marriage when someone else is wanting you to do the same thing because you're two broken people and
Yeah.
needing love in different ways and with different challenges and circumstances in your life on a given day, different needs, different emotions, different feelings, all that crazy
All of
stuff.
the things.
And you're kind of like basically a baby, I felt like,
Yeah.
and with these expectations. And so we really had to navigate through that and expectations. There was a lot of arguing. I'm not one to just sit back and be quiet if I am not happy. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna tell
Same.
you. And so, which can be a good thing,
Yeah.
Um, anyway, but I will tell you what I had learned through my
Mm.
previous struggles is that God is always there and He provides an answer and a way out. And we did
Yes.
seek the church for help. And that has been the key to our relationship and our marriage. And we'll be married 19 years in a few months.
Wow.
And yeah.
I snap. I'm a
So,
snapper.
I love that. I love that.
You're like, what is
So,
she doing?
and honestly, I will tell you, he would say too, we are happier now than we were every year. It really, truly does get better. I am more filled in my relationship because I am more filled with the Lord and because God has taken a bigger space in my heart.
Yeah.
And we both have done that work to get there. It wasn't easy. But I can, looking back over the years, and even though we had some, some ups and downs, and every time there was a little bit of friction, there was a dip or a valley, we always came out stronger because we knew where to turn. Um, and I knew where to turn. A lot of times when I wanted there was even a season where I wanted it to be like, you need to do something. And I learned at one point, this was a big thing for me. I had to learn I needed to change. I couldn't change him. I still can't, but I can change me. I can change my heart. I can
Amen.
change my perspective. I can grow my relationship with the Lord. And that was everything. That changed everything for me.
You know what this reminds me of? And honestly, I haven't even read the book, but I've talked a lot about it with my therapist, is the search for significance. Yeah.
Ah, keep going. I have
No,
something
no,
about that
you
book.
tell it. Yeah. You tell me what you have because
Let
you,
me tell you, I don't even remember the details of the book. That is the book when I first went to church after my breakthrough moment. Okay, my you know, what I was telling you about, my low point,
yeah.
my rock bottom. That when I first went to church, that is, and I should have said I went to a Christian counselor, but also alongside that, my mom invited me to a class at church. I'd never done a study in my life.
Yeah.
And it was The Search for Significance. That's the book that
Okay.
we
So that
studied. That
was
was
the
my
Holy
first book
Spirit.
that I ever read. Yes.
Oh my
Crazy. Okay.
gosh.
I
That
was
is
like,
the
when you
Holy
said that, I
Spirit
was
right
like,
there. Cause I'm like, I
"Oh
haven't
my
even
goodness."
read this book, but I just felt like The Holy Spirit was like, search for significance, search for, I was,
That
okay.
is what that is the search that was the search I began, and so that was the book. There you go.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to put the link to that book in the show notes because I wonder if there's someone out there who's listening to this podcast that might, and maybe it's me. Like, I think I need to actually go and read that book because this is something
Okay, me
that,
too. Let's do it.
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I think that that's something that I have kind of been struggling with in my own marriage recently and
Mm,
forever, but it's more come to a head recently in that like I do subconsciously search for significance in my significant other. I'm like, you need
mm,
to tell me I'm beautiful. And if you don't, then I'm
mm,
not beautiful. Or
mm,
you need to tell me, or you need to like do this certain thing or hold my hand in public or whatever, or else I'm not worthy. It's so funny that the Lord had called me to start this podcast called Created Worthy because worthiness is my core struggle.
mm,
I struggle with feeling worthy. And it's been a
mm,
process of understanding what is worth, what is worthiness, what does God say about worthiness, and are we
mm,
really created worthy? And that's where the answer is always inevitably yes. We are
mhm,
created worthy. Now,
mhm.
what we choose, if we choose to step into our worth, that's on, based on the decisions
Yes.
we make as we get older,
Mhm,
and where we look for our significance, where we look to place our identity and where our source of worthiness is. But the actual like going back to the search for significance, like that is a search that I think as wives and probably as humans in general, but specifically in this context as wives, like it's just so easy to fall into that. Like, my husband's not doing this, or he's not reading his Bible every day, so he must not be a leader, a spiritual leader, or,
mm,
there's just all of these different things that rabbit
right,
holes that we can go down and be like so unfulfilled when really, and I know that the book points to this, the only place we can find our significance is in the Lord. That's the
right.
only place that we're going to actually feel fulfilled because he's the
Amen.
source of our worth. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I love that you brought this up. I think it's amazing that the search for significance was the first
Isn't that
book study that you ever did. That is
first? Yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
Well, okay. Congratulations on 19 years of marriage. It is a
Thank
choice
you.
every single day. And I think
Yeah.
just hearing a little bit about your story and how even despite, relationship struggles and things you went through prior, like you guys have
Mhm.
fought to continue to grow stronger. And it hasn't been through fighting each other, right?
Yeah.
It's been
Right,
through choosing to partner with the Lord and
right,
know
right.
and trust that that is the person he has for you and that
Yep.
that is your husband and
Mhm.
he has uniquely and purposefully designed you for each other.
Yes.
So thank you for that encouragement.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot the conversation into one
Okay.
of my very favorite topics ever. It's creative processing. Have I
Okay.
talked to you about creative processing before?
No, I don't think so. Let's hear it.
Okay. Okay. So, creative processing is a term that the Lord put on my heart in 2021 after so many years of just trying to intentionally heal from my own childhood wounds and knowing that I was creative by nature, but still just, I got to this point where I was hating what I was creating.
Okay.
And it was right around this, it was just before I started this podcast that he actually landed the term creative processing in my heart and my spirit. And then it's been a process of what does that mean? And how is this an tangible tool that can help people find the things we're actually searching for? Peace, joy,
Mhm.
contentment, um,
Mhm.
belonging, all of the things that are readily available to us through Christ. But how do we actually tangibly access that? Because that for me was the hard part. Like, I get it. Like, he says that they're available, but like, I feel anxious. I feel overwhelmed. I feel stressed. So how do I access that? Well, he was like, the creativity, your innate creativity is the gift. That is the key for you to unlock not only healing, but all of the things that are readily available to you through me. So,
Mm.
creative processing, by definition, is a tool that we, um, blah, blah, blah. Cut that out. creative Creative processing is activating your creative mind to process a certain intention. That's all it is. It's very simple. It's pairing creativity with intention, and that's it. So,
Okay.
how I started to practice this was by using the prompt, the purpose of enter your creative outlet, whatever that is. It can be cleaning, it could be journaling, it can be writing, it could be, crafting, scrapbooking, going on a walk. Some people's is like going out in nature. There are all kinds of ways that God has created us in which our creative minds are actually activated. Some people, the shower can be a creative processing method. It activates your creative mind. So the purpose of enter your creative outlet is to enter your certain intention, any certain intention. And that's the reason I ask in all my pre-interview forms, what is your primary creative methods? And for you, you said journaling for therapy, depression, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, and nonfiction topical reading too. And I was like, this is perfect. The reason I asked for that is to give you an example of how creative processing is probably something you might already subconsciously be doing. But when you have a term for it, then we can practice it with more intention. And I think intention helps us to really focus our energy and focus our giftings into whatever the struggle is, whatever's keeping us stuck. So a prompt that you could use would be the purpose of journaling is to process feeling overwhelmed, whatever you're feeling overwhelmed about in that moment. This is a tool that's really specifically helpful for those of us with busy minds, which I would say most humans have busy minds. But it just helps us to slow down and process the actual source of our suffering in that moment. Yes. Whatever that is, whether it is depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's overwhelm, those things those are actually responses to what's actually going on. But if we don't take time to process what's actually going on, then you're just burying it. And guess what? As you probably know, you're gonna explode or you're gonna implode, and it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck really bad.
Absolutely. I
And
get
you're
all of
gonna
this.
have panic attacks, or you're going to have you're gonna come to a place where you're in an existential crisis and you have no idea who you are or why you're here. That happens. It unfortunately does happen. But the goal with creative processing is to say, Lord, thank you for making me a creative being. Even if I don't consider myself a creative, every single person is a creative being because we were created by a creator. So I think that creativity is something that is within every single one of us.
Yeah.
So using our creativity as the innate gift that it is, so that we can access the things he has for us and process the lives that he's given us. We're not just meant to be like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, but I'm just going to hope that it goes away. No, process those things so that you can walk forward with intention, so that you can slow your mind down. You can regulate your nervous system. There's so much science behind creative processing.
Oh, yeah.
And what ended up happening for me in my story is that it became like muscle memory. So things like preparing for this podcast episode, or having a client call, or bedtime with my daughter. Creative processing became intertwined with just about everything that I do, which is why I'm able to do quite a few different things, because I'm able to slow down and just process that one thing after a lot of practice. Right. So it now has become like muscle memory for me. And it's something that I am teaching other people about. And I'm traveling and speaking and doing creative processing workshops to show people that like, this is something that is super simple and can be integrated into all of our lives. And it probably already is. But when you know better, you do better. And so it's just a tool, a tangible tool to be able to do better. And not feel so worried and stressed out. Or if you do feel worried and stressed out, like not avoiding it.
Yeah. I can totally relate. Yeah. I never had a word for it, but like I totally understand. And when I after I had my twins, I went through some postpartum depression, and I saw yet another, a different Christian counselor, and
Yeah.
she prescribed journaling for me. And this was before I'd even started writing, and it was so therapeutic. But actually, it's what led me to begin writing, because as I was pouring out what I was feeling, and then sort of then pouring back truths over these things I was feeling, I realized how much encouragement I was receiving just by
Mhm.
putting it on paper and exposing it to the light. And then I thought, what if I could encourage others through these things I'm actually encouraging myself with?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be? And so really, I love the fact that God used that dark season. We got another dark season that I was like, why am I going through this? Everything's good. I know the things to do. I know that God is the one to fill me and to go to. And I was at a
Mhm.
really good place, I thought, but he allowed that to then lead me into something, creative processing, that then opened my heart even more and then allowed it to help other people.
And that is so, I love that example because that is such a beautiful example of what God does do with our creativity when we
Mm.
decide to pair that with intention. Like, I think
Yeah.
you probably were like, well, it wasn't even subconscious. You consciously were like, I can help other people. So I'm going to process my story to help other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
look, now you have an incredible book. So I would love for you to tell us now um, about where you're at today, what is happening, what's coming up next for you in your life and your business.
Mm.
And then, yeah, talk to us about your book.
So I had never planned on writing, but I have 5 kids. So we talked about when I was married, and then let's see, the twins were born 11, 12 years later. I have 3 kids. There was a 7-year gap. There's a whole God
Yeah.
story in there. And then I decided to have one more baby because God was leading me to do this. That's a whole story. It's in my book. And then when I decided to go for it and have this baby he was calling me to have, ended up being twins, which was a huge surprise.
What?
Beautiful blessing. One of those things that um, gosh, it's a story that will still bring me to tears when I really go in and open it up because it was just so beautiful.
I want to have
But
you back and we're going to do a part 2. I want to hear all about this.
there's so much. That was a really sweet story. So then when the twins were born, life was good. I, obediently walked, and there it was. And like I said, all of a sudden I'm in this like postpartum depression phase of life. And I'm like, what is this? I had 3 other babies, never had that. Of course, I was 38 at the time. It was a little bit later in my life having these twins. So maybe my body just wasn't handling the same. I don't know. Regardless, God used that season for so much good. He had a plan for me to use all the things I talked, all the dark stuff I had gone through, and redeem it to help other
Mm.
people. And so that's when, like I said, I started journaling, and light bulbs started going off. I had also become a student of the word. I had become a student of I couldn't get my hands on enough sermons and, you know, um, nonfiction books, anything that was helpful that was God breathed. I wanted it because I knew it would help me in my life.
Yeah.
I was just seeking Him like never before. I had gained so much wisdom through my experience, through what I had learned. And when I started to write, um, all the light bulbs went off. Like, oh, I could help somebody else. I've got all these. I'm not short on words. I have so much to say. So then a seed was planted to write a book. And honestly, at the time, I was like, I could write lots of books. I've got so much I could say. Didn't know what I was going to write about, but it was really my first book is called Win Over Worry. And I would not have written about worry initially because that is something that I struggled with so much myself. But later, I decided I was the perfect person to write about worry because
Yeah.
I'd been there. And yes, it's still very much a part of my story, but I've overcome so much. And um, I truly have. And someone once
Mhm.
said to me, Carrie, if you're one step ahead of somebody, you can help them. And I thought, okay, then. And who better to help someone than someone that's been there and say, I can hold your hand, walk you through this. And so that's what I did. And I actually did an online poll asking my audience what they struggled with the most. And I gave 4 different options, worry being the one I hoped that they wouldn't choose. And of course they did. So I felt like
Yeah.
I had to do that. But anyway, I it's been a gift to be able to write about it in the book. The majority of my focus is truly on God's sovereign control and his love. So when you talk about your worth, that is very near and dear to me because I have this belief that at the root of all of these things we worry about at the surface every day, there's two root fears that are at the root of all these worries. And one of them is tied to a fear of worthlessness. And the other is a fear of helplessness. But it's the worthlessness I want to camp out on for a second because this is a lot of what you talk about. There is so much that I needed to learn about the love that God has for me unconditionally and perfect love. And there's so much that to know, like, just think for a second, and I kind of get into this in the book quite a bit, but if we could understand with all that we are that we are loved more than we can possibly imagine, like cared for um, so meticulously, and we are a child of God that is so protected and valued more than we can possibly imagine. And not only that, that God is a God of, He is almighty and He has all the control, not us that we
Yeah.
think that we do. He is in control. It is good. If we can understand that He loves us and His control and it's good, then what in the world do we have to worry about? Like, I know that sounds so simple, but if we can really just write it on our hearts and understand all the things the Bible has to say about God's control and God's almighty love for us, then it can really start to slowly wash peace over all those worries and fears. And that's a whole process. There's 224 pages that I write about it, but and stories too. But I'm just very passionate about it because it was part of my story. It still is. I think it's very much woven into all of our stories as
Yeah.
well. But that's where I am now. The book was just released last September, so not long ago.
Yeah, it's
And
beautiful.
yeah, well, thank you.
I
So
love
that's
it.
life for me now, and I hope to keep on writing because I love to serve and help others with words. That's my creative processing outlet for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. And you have such a beautiful way with words.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I'm so glad that you were obedient to the call on your life to talk about worry because yeah, I mean, I get it. I when the Lord was like, you're gonna do a podcast where you're talking about everyone being worthy, I was like, what?
Right.
That's funny, God.
Mhm, mhm.
Wrong person. I am not.
I get
And
that.
he's like, yep. And that is,
Yep, you.
yep. He's like, yep, I said you. I was like,
Yeah.
you not, you mean her?
Mhm,
but,
mhm.
but you were obedient to that call. And he
Yeah.
is blessing that in so many ways. You're like I said, I love your book. I love cover design is like
Oh.
designer. And so I was, I picked up your book and I was like, I love it. It's like textured. The words are raised. You're like, yeah, I didn't even notice that.
I do like the way it turned out. Thank
Yes,
you.
it's wonderful. And I haven't read it yet. I have to be honest, but I'm going to read it. I promise. Is it on
I think
Audible
you'll
as
like it.
well?
It will be coming, but not yet.
Okay. Okay. That is as soon as it's on Audible, I'm going to listen to it because I am an
Okay,
Audible learner. So
I get it.
if I sat down and tried to read it, I you would ask me a question and I'd be like, I was probably singing songs in the back of my head. So
I can relate. I can relate.
yes, yes. But I'm really excited for you. I am
Thank
sure that you are
you.
going to have many more books to come. I can see them
Yeah.
within you. Where can listeners best find and connect with you? And I will have all your information in the show notes, but where's the
Yeah, for
best place
sure.
for them?
I would say Instagram. I hang out there most days, unless I'm taking a sabbatical because sometimes it's a little too much for me. But yeah, Instagram.
Yeah.
You can find me on Facebook also. But my website, it's KeriIkberger.com. It's Keri with a
Okay.
K.
Carrie with a K and
Mhm.
an I.
Yeah.
Yes.
KERI, like the
Yes.
lotion, if you remember.
Yes. Well, Carrie, I am so grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and vulnerability to share your story. Keep shining your light and sharing the truth that God has planted in your heart. Your words are so perfectly ordained by God to meet people right where they're at so that they too can win over worry. You, my friend, are created worthy. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you, and if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.